PechaKucha Night Richmond, Volume 3. And I couldn't figure out the volume thing and why we were Volume 3, but apparently there had been a couple of, like 1 or 2 PechaKucha nights in the past in Richmond, but it never really took root. I'll tell you more a little bit about our plans for it going forward, but how many of you have been to a PechaKucha night? So a few of you. For those of you unfamiliar, PechaKucha has a 20 by 20 presentation format. It's a slideshow of 20 images, each auto-advancing after 20 seconds. It's non-stop, and presenters have a total of 400 seconds to tell their story. Kristen has this on auto. She's not going to touch it. If she tries to touch it, the hammer comes down, and at the end of the presentation, we boot the presenter out from behind the mic. So PechaKucha was created in Japan in 2003 by 2 architects, and the word PechaKucha means, in Japanese, chit-chat. So, Christy, can you go to the next one, please? The branch, I reversed the slides, all right? We applied for the PechaKucha, you have to get a license to use the PechaKucha brand, and we applied for it. And I got all the way through the application process, and then someone emailed me from PechaKucha to say somebody else has the license, and I was like, oh, God, And they were like, well, we can put you in touch with that person. I'll talk about that person in a minute. And you can look to partnering, et cetera, but they sent us a list of requirements for the events, and one of the most important requirements was beer. There should be beer. And so Hardywood has very graciously become a beer sponsor for the event. And there's some folks from Hardywood here. I think there are a few people who signed up. They may not be here yet, but hopefully we'll see them later. But we're very grateful to the folks at Hardywood. So that's the guy who had the license, and I emailed Mitchell and asked him, I was like, hey, you've had the license for a little while, we'd like to do something with this, are you interested in partnering with us? We're a design museum, I'm new here, and we really love to do this, and Mitchell was like, sure, I need some help, and I would love to do that. So Mitchell couldn't be with us tonight because he's still trying to shake off COVID, but he is an associate creative director at Lamar Media. And after graduating from Parsons School of Design, Mitchell's had a career spanning about 16 years, working as a designer for Time Out New York, working as a studio artist for Showtime, and he's been a creative director at several agencies around town here in RVA. So with that, I am going to introduce our first speaker, David Bohnhoff of Bohnhoff Woodworking. At a young age, David knew he had a love for furniture, the arts, and boats. This led him to the landing school for boat building and design in Maine, and he followed that with a BFA in crafts with an emphasis in furniture making from VCU. After honing his skills in custom cabinet and wooden boat building shops, he decided to open his own studio in 2007 in pursuit of designing and building handmade, one-of-a-kind furniture and cabinetry. And if you don't follow him on Instagram, you should, because he posts a lot about his process, which the theme tonight is loosely around the design process, and he'll talk a little bit about that. But it's a terrific Instagram, and you really get a look at every step of the furniture making process. So being able to turn his visions into reality, his work has been commissioned by organizations like the Virginia Department of Forestry, SUNY at Rockport, local businesses, and private clients. You're up, David.
Thank you, Sharon. My passion for craft came in my early teens. My love of boats and things nautical has always been of interest to me. After secondary school, where I learned some ceramics and architectural design, I attended the landing school of boat building and design in Maine, and then VCU for the crafts program. With school done, I looked for jobs in the boat building industry. Being drawn to circles, curved line, and I loved And loving my time spent in Maine, both seemed like a good fit. I moved to Annapolis and worked with a crew refitting yacht interiors in a tiny little modern wood shop in the old Matthews Trumpian sheet shop. So it had history. We also built a modified cold molded dead rise. It was based off of the Hooper Island drake tail. The first one I worked on, Wood Duck, can be read about in Wooden Boat magazine number 136. So if you're interested in this vessel, check that out. This is where I really learned about bending and molding wood into curves and compound bent forms. Following this passion of boat building, I moved to North Carolina and worked building strip plank sport fishing boats. We, the crew, planked the wooden frame boats one at a time, then moved to other areas of the vessel, adding structure like bulkheads and fitting fuel and water tanks. I finished in the cockpit building cabinets, bay wells, and teak decks. These heavily built vessels were quite different than the lightweight cold molded plywood boats from Annapolis. I employ most of these techniques learned from both shops in my current body of work and add to them through experimentation. This is one of the finished cockpits. This end table. Moved back to Central Virginia in 2005 to work with a classmate from VCU. We built cabinets. I quickly missed the challenges of diversity of working in a boat yard. The bench commissioned here was located at the head offices of the Department of Forestry in Charlottesville. It has a beefy finger-jointed armrest leg structure, a laminated crest rail with a slatted seat, and a handle-over backrest. This was a testing of Atlantis or the Tree of Heaven to see if there could be any commercial value in it. The horseshoe bench here from the SUNY Brockport is a LEEDS project, reusing ash trees from a new campus building. Selected benches are used and housed in the new building. This is built from 4 laminated ash horseshoe shapes with a double layer of steam vent slats, copper riveted over the frame. Weston's stool is a combined design between client and myself. It employs solid curves, tapered legs, 5 of them, joined by 2 segmented white oak circles and a molded plywood seat, crotched mahogany veneer. The contoured seat gives great support and is very comfortable to sit in. End table, repurposed ash, tapered vent laminations with a segmented circle top and a circular end grain butcher block base. Using plastic resin glues for these laminations, and the temperature is right in the summer when this was actually built. A planer sled allows me to create wooden wedges to be laminated. Apparently, the dining room table is the same, so I must have been doing this about the same time. I've been very fortunate to have clients that have allowed me unique and creative spirit in the pieces that they purchase. But hey, that's one of the great things about Richmond, right? The art community. Drake tail, one of my favorite pieces to date, a bent wood white oak frame with a thin skin of cypress. This is where I started experimenting with compound bent elements in my work. The chair floated around in my head for a long time, and it's nice to finally see it turn into reality. Rasowick. This design is developed for demonstrating the steam bending process. It's built with steam bent ribs. The jig was the most challenging part to this build. It needed to be reusable and come out of the structure once it was complete, so I was able to finish the table for use. The single drawer desk, it's curly white oak, compound bent wood leg structure that holds the drawer box. Again, I'm using the mold and a freeform method to allow the wood to bend into a natural twist. So I'm able to compound bend it, and I can splay the pieces out for decorative appeal. This is Brockport Bench Project number 2, a slight departure of no bent wood. It's inspired by the lift bridges in town along the Erie Canal, and the tendon joinery is all pinned with copper rivets. It can be seen in Fine Woodworking magazine along with the other benches, 2020, issue 285. Susan's chair. This came from some canoe molds of a cedar strip canoe that I built at Legend in the mid-90s. Full-length bent seat and backrest slats. Some are twisting with the curves of the chair. And this is Mito. This is done by my good friend Jomo Tariku, an Ethiopian and American industrial designer. Together we were working on some bent wood and shaped curved chairs. Mito is laminated using sliced 1/16 inch veneers. The molds are cut using the CNC machine. And we are using epoxy resin glue for all the glue ups. There was a ton of discussion of how-tos before we even started the first one. 5 separate molds are used to create the cone tines. The back leg pierces the seat and is pinned with concealed brass rods. Its feet is collected at the museum.
Was anybody finding that? That's good. Okay, so what I forgot to mention at the top of the event was that when we save questions, after the first three speakers, we'll do a beer break and you can ask them questions, and then after the second 3 speakers, you can ask questions. So next up is the branch's own intrepid Deputy Director, Heather Ernst. And we were actually trying to figure out how to make this harder for Heather, but we decided to go easy. But a little bit about Heather that people who know her don't often know until later. Heather Hart Ernst grew up working in her family's lighting and furniture design and manufacturing company, Hart Associates, working with clients from the United States, Europe, Japan, and Canada on custom lighting and furniture designs. Heather studied art and interior design at Louisiana Tech University in our hometown of Ruston, Louisiana, while working in the family business, but eventually left to travel and enjoyed a successful career in the design, arts, and events industries, managing projects and leading teams. Heather's going to discuss the design process for the handmade custom lighting and furniture that made Hart Associates known around the world as a leader in the lighting industry for great design, attention to detail, and its custom capabilities. Another great Instagram to follow, Hart Associates.
My name is Heather Hart Ernst, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my history and why I'm up here tonight talking about the process of design. I grew up in a very small town in North Louisiana called Ruston, and my family designed and manufactured lighting and furniture. This all started around the mid-1960s when Peggy and Bill Hart had each just graduated from Louisiana Tech with degrees in interior design. They started making light fixtures, mostly hand-painted tole lighting. And after a few years, they began to get attention in the lighting industry. Well, around this time, my father, Charles Hart, Bill's brother, also graduated from Louisiana Tech with his degree in interior design. He decided he wanted to join the business and take it from a small studio of 3 people to an international company, and that's just what he did. At its highest point, Hart Associates employed about 100 people in our small little town of Ruston, each of them artisans in their own right. After a while, Peggy left to become a jewelry designer, while Bill and Charles went on to design and manufacture lighting and furniture for over 40 years, working with top designers around the world. So how did I get started working with them? Well, I started out in grade school. During the summers, my sisters and I would stuff and stamp envelopes to mail out price lists. In college, I worked my way up to managing the customer service department, and eventually I started to work closely with my dad on market designs and working with clients on custom designs. For the over 40 years that Hart Associates was in business, twice a year, 15 to 20 new products were introduced. That's thousands of products that were designed and manufactured over the course of over 40 years. And this was just the product line. We also worked with clients to customize any piece. So if someone wanted this particular piece, but let's make it 8 feet in diameter to fit into the foyer of a large residence or country club, we could do that. Each item either started out with a hand drawing or an idea. Bill or Charles would then work with the fabricators in the factory to create a prototype. The process for deciding if the product was good enough to go from a prototype into full production went it's something like, does it meet the required aesthetic parameters? Does it meet the needs that the item was made for? For instance, this chair. The iron frame was melded to meet the aesthetic design, but after it was made, it had to be tested. Does it lean forward when you sit in it? Is it a comfortable height? Adjustments would be made from there before going to market. Sometimes a design is inspired by the materials themselves. These chandeliers started out as some square brass tubing, some crystal pieces, and a vision. The square tubing was hand-rolled to create the exact curve that was desired, and then the pieces were welded together and the rest assembled by hand. After an item passed the necessary aesthetic and functional tests, as well as UL standards, then it was time to decide what finish would best represent the item for market. Design time was also when new finishes were designed, which over 40 years meant a lot of handcrafted finishes. When designing an object, especially lighting or furniture, one might think about the silhouette of that item and how it would look if it were in an actual space. But what sometimes takes design to the next level is focusing on the details. How does the arm connect to the neck, and so on. Since everything at Hart Associates was made by hand, per order, a client could order a design in whatever finish fit their own needs. They would see the initial design at market or in their catalog and could order it just like that, or in a completely different finish. Lanterns could be ordered hardwired or set up for gas lighting. They could be wall-mounted or designed to be installed on a post or even hanging. This element of customization is one of the things that made us unique. It also required extreme organization and logistical planning, as well as a lot of patience from our clients. Charles Eames said, "The design is a plan for arranging elements in a way that best accomplishes a particular purpose." At this point in the design process, our products were being designed in the hopes that they would fit the needs or desires for the general public, creating shapes and finishes that were beautiful, functional, and innovative. But as we've discussed several times around here at the branch, design always has an impact on our everyday lives. So someone who wants or needs a new light or piece of furniture may have a specific aesthetic preference or a specific need. That leads us to another element of design. Designing an item so that it might meet the specific requirements of an individual person. Often we talk about the difference between art and design. To me, something that is designed usually has a purpose, fits a need or desire. Maybe it solves a problem. Maybe that problem is that someone needs or wants a place to sit. Maybe they need or want more functional and attractive lighting in their home or place of business. Part of my job is to communicate with the clients to find out their specific needs or desires and then work with the team to meet those requirements. This is not always an easy task. There's almost always some degree of surprise as to what an actual physical outcome will be when it goes from measurements, words, ideas, and even drawings into the final product. But this was also the fun part. Taking an idea of what someone wants and being able to communicate what that is and ultimately bringing it to life is challenging and represents one of the best means of human interactions. Even though Hart is no longer in production, I still love to see people collecting vintage Hart pieces and appreciating the importance of design and hard work that I learned growing up in the design family.
All right. Next up is Hunter Graham of RIC Design Build. Hunter Graham is a woodworker and artist from Richmond, Virginia. He works as a carpenter at RIC Design Build. This is really effective. I have glasses on my head trying to read 14.1. RIC Design Build, a small residential design company focusing on sustainability, craftsmanship, and attention to detail. Hunter received a BFA in graphic design from VCU. This background in graphic design has deeply informed his current furniture making practice. Hunter?
Hello, my name is Hunter. I'm going to be talking to y'all about a project that has been kind of consuming my life recently, which is this house that was designed by Thomas Gresham in 1963 for Robert and Yasuko Akita. This is an image of the house. One of the things that first drew me to this house was this ginormous oak tree at the entrance to the house. The house kind of is tucked into the forest, and the trees they meander their way into the clear story. Wood being a massive inspiration to this project. Allan's family has a longleaf pine farm, and her father went to Japan when she was a little girl, and this is the next image. I've been very inspired by the internet and the things that I found along the way. This is an image of an arborist. This is an image of Dylan Iwakani. He is a carpenter who is my current idol right now. I have just been basking in all these different carpenters making amazing things. He's currently working on a team to take apart an folk house in Japan and move it, and it's going to be a chair museum. I went and did a trip to Maine, and I stayed in Portland, and I found it to be a sister city to Providence in Tokyo. And when we were there, I ran into a knife sharpening store, and I was able to purchase my first natural sharpening stone, where I've been able to just become obsessed with sharpening the blade of the knives and the chisels, and that's sort of what is driven this project, is the passion that I found of this Japanese design and the way that they fully embed themselves into these projects. The Tansu cabinets were made for each individual person. They were all finished in different ways, different purposes. I got obsessed with Urashi finish, which is a type of lacquer that they use. This derived from a tree similar to a poison ivy. These are some drawings early on in my project. The geometry of this was very important. You can tell from looking through all the cabinets that I was looking at, the importance of this asymmetrical design, because they use that in order to create balance and tranquility. And this is a mallet that I made early on in the project, laid out using a set of dividers that was from my great-grandfather. This chisel is a chisel set that I bought. It's a mortising chisel set by Oichi is the chisel brand. He's a 4th generation chisel maker in Japan. I find that to be just absolutely fascinating, to be working with these really age-old techniques that have been passed down through the ages. This is a blade that I found at the Tool Barn in Maine. It's a spoke shave blade, and it had a sticker on it priced at, dated 1783. In Japan, they have a competition to see who can shave the thinnest shaving of wood with their block plane. It has to be consistently shaved. I'm learning. This is still so thin. These are some samples of some joints that I made, glued with hide glue. I wasn't sure how the hide glue was going to hold up in a bathroom. Being the cabinet was going to go in a bathroom, I wanted to see how it was going to survive. So I let it hang out in there, and every now and then I would take a shower and I would crank on it, pull on it, see if it would break. This is me using a viewfinder to find where I wanted my drawer fronts based on 2 book-matched pieces of wood. This is one of the joints that I've been working out. It's giving me a lot of trouble, and I didn't know how to do it, and someone online that I follow made a replica of a tan suit, and they posted it, and I said, that's awesome, let me see that, and he sent it to me, and I was able to replicate the joint. I went camping, ran into a persimmon tree. There's a persimmon tree in Allan's backyard. I didn't know what to do with I added a 3rd wood to my cabinet, and I'm going to dye it with a persimmon tannin. This is a saw that I just bought, and the corresponding file, so that I can learn how to resharpen my blade, so that I can create forever. Depending on, like, who knows what's going to happen in the future, and I want to be able to work in such a way that I'm always going to be able to work. This is a note from my grandmother that I found in a book. She sort of saved all the tools that I've been working with recently.
Questions, if you want to stay here and ask questions of our first 3 speakers, or you go grab another beer, and then we'll come back in exactly 10 minutes to continue with our next 3 speakers. Exactly 10 minutes later. All right, so next up is a lovely person I met when we both helped make a fashion show possible here. There's a wonderful group in town called Richmond Really Sews, founded by Karen Swirling. It has, we knew there were so many sewists in Richmond and around the world. Unicia just designed this amazing outfit for that event, and we all fell in love with it and her work. And she is a Richmond native. She received her BFA from Cornell University and an MA from George Mason University. She won the Jurors' Choice Award for the inaugural 48 to Create at the Visual Arts Center, and she was a recipient of the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts Artist Fellowship. Unicia has exhibited throughout Richmond and Virginia, as well as in New York, Italy, DC, and South Carolina. She's taught art workshops at Oakwood Arts, at the Visual Arts Center of Richmond, and privately. Unicia.
My creative process is not only influenced by my experiences in life, but also by my exploration with different media and techniques. I love learning new things and allowing the process to help shape my art. My favorite medium is fabric, which I have created dolls, soft sculptures, costumes, and art quilts. Quilting began for me in college when I incorporated photography and painting into quilt making for my thesis. Since then, my practice has evolved as I learn new things like free motion quilting using fabric inks and beading, like in this quilt, Afro Beauty, I call Afro Beauty. Every time I learn a new technique, I put it into practice. Our World, which was inspired by 4 youth I met in an area middle school, is my first fully collaged quilt. Unlike the previous, I had to pre-draw the design and put it into a pattern before starting the sewing. This was also my first quilt as a diptych. Both of these designs were inspired by the Second Street Festival. In the first one, I had found new fabric paints and inks that I bought at a quilt show and watercolor pencils. With the second one, I explored hand embroidery and using the sewing machine to stitch names in cursive, which is kind of hard to see at the top. One of my favorite quilting techniques is free motion echo lines, which are lines that repeat to fill in a space. I wanted to play off that by hand drawing the lines with fabric markers and then further adding texture with the free motion echo lines, as you see an impression of identity and fountain of youth. The subject of my art quilts is usually people that are close to me or people I learn about with a historical occurrence. Charles is a portrait of my father who loved fishing. Uncommon denominator is a portrait of Elizabeth Van Leeuwen and Mary Bowser. I discovered doll making by Googling crafts and found a blog that showed how to make a rag doll. After making several dolls from this and other patterns from books, I came up with my own pattern and style. Each doll I make is one of a kind, and these I make for children to play with. This led me to the awesome world of art dolls. My first set was inspired by nature. The prayer plant, snake plant, daffodil, iris, peony, rose, and dogwood flowers, and insects like the cecropia moth, luna moth, malachite butterfly, and carpenter bee all found their way in these dolls. But before they were dolls, they were something I am brand new to. I designed and created these costumes inspired by nature. Here I'm wearing quilted leaves painted like tennis or never plants. And the doll, Our Lady Tennis, is inspired by it. I also ventured into woodworking with these dolls for the base. The costumes were part of my residency at Lewis Ganner Botanical Garden. This one was worn for Mother's Day. I went up to people who had children and I said, here's your bouquet of flowers. Happy Mother's Day. Bye Bye Little Dragonfly is a recent art doll creation falling back on my echo lines. I hand drew each of the wings and the pedestal. I also incorporated line cut printing and wire armature, which came in handy for the dolls on the right when I took a stop motion animation class at the Art Center. My current project came from an idea to create a comic strip similar to the Sunday comics. However, I don't know how to draw comics. So I took my favorite medium, figured out how to make my main characters, Nisi and Fallopian. Here Nisi asks, what are you doing? And Fallopia, who represents the womb, is secretly taking out her eggs, placing them in a box, and the sign reads, eggs for sale no longer needed. It's meant to get people comfortable about the uncomfortable to gain a better understanding of a natural part of the human body. Aside from fabric, I too love to paint. I began in 2020 Intimate Discoveries out of Frida Kahlo, a series of self-portrait paintings that explore topics about the human experience. Natural comes from imagining our species as being smaller and less impactful on our earth and the environment. Floating is inspired by a poem I wrote of the same name about overcoming depression. The last two lines of the poem read, I give the deep a goodbye, let it scream from the gutter. It holds me no more, I greet the day to ever. I also discovered a world of giant silk moths and fell in love. After finding out that they are born without a digestive system and don't live very long, fragility speaks to how fragile life can be and having an appreciation for what is given to us. Every day we interact with people and leave these interactions with certain emotions. These emotions link us and help shape who we are and influence future connections. So I named this painting Connections, and it includes the first names of those people who contributed to the individual I am today. MC Escher is one of those names. His art had a big influence on me, and not only my drawing style, but also use of contrast. Tessellated afros is a drawing I created with shapes that could be repeated, but I drew each face within the shape uniquely. Coloring curls started out as a doodle type drawing I did on my lunch break. At the time, I also was exploring the mandala and its meaning, and And a semblance of this was incorporated in my drawings, which eventually became a book. This led to a second book that was made more personal, as I drew people I knew as opposed to doodling an imaginary person, and I wrote my own quotes. My graphic design skills came in handy for designing the cover and layout of both books. That's my art in a nutshell. Thank you.
All right, next up is Musarra. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Okay. Sal is a landscape architect, and he has been in private practice for over 40 years with a broad portfolio of work in the USA and abroad. His career arc includes the planning and design of public parks, golf courses, and resort communities, master planned communities, commercial and mixed-use site development, healthcare campuses, downtown revitalization plans, and community engagement facilitation. Sal has held a variety of roles, including project management, office management, and ownership with regional and national consulting firms, as well as a self-proprietor of his own consulting practice. He's a native Virginian. He's lived in Atlanta and Raleigh, and has lived in Richmond since 2015. He's also a graduate of the Landscape Architecture program at Virginia Tech. Sal.
Thank you. Here we go. So if I would have dumped a pile of puzzle pieces in front of you right now and walked away and said complete the puzzle, what would your thought process look like? What would the design process look like? It would be very linear. It would be piece by piece. You could find an edge in the corner, but you have no vision. You have no direction that you're working toward, right? But how different would it be if I give you the image and say, okay, this is what you're making? Your thought process is completely different. It's now outcome-based, right? Now you have a direction, you have a vision to work toward, and you can design a strategy toward achieving that end game. So I'm going to talk about design process in the design of spaces and places, and linear versus outcome. Here's a city street. It's got all the elements of good urban design, right? It's got lighting, it's got a sidewalk, it's got a curb, it's got on-street parking, but it's not good urban design. Because it was a linear design process, it was a disconnected process of trying to figure out, I'm going to add all these different elements, but I don't have a vision, and no guiding performance standards. This is a city street too. This is the same design elements, but look at how different it looks and feels. This is an outcome-based design process that says we have some performance standards, and when we do a sidewalk, when we do a street, when we do this environment, it's going to look and perform something like this, and it's going to have an outcome that we've already planned. This is downtown Greenville, South Carolina. This is an outcome-based design process. It's a vision-based design process. I would contrast this to what I think we're doing in Scott's Addition, which I think is a linear process. We have new buildings, we have new uses inside of old buildings, but there's no there. The sidewalks aren't good, the parking's not good. It's just not a place that has an essence. This is historic Court Street in Hoboken, New Jersey. On the waterfront was filmed here for us old people. The city engineered new improvements to the drainage, to the paving, to the sidewalks that are making it better. And the residents said, we don't want that. So the city didn't understand the outcome before they went ahead and proposed a design solution. My favorite, the Troll in Seattle. So the linear process of design would say, there's a problem, there's vacancy, let's put up a chain link fence and keep people out. What they did was said, let's bring people in. And now this is a beloved icon in Seattle. There's a children's book. They have festivals around and it's decorated during all the holidays. I'm just going to forget my notes. So, Veterans Park, I spent 6 years designing this park. It honors our veterans. It was outcome-based. We had a year of stakeholder engagement with veterans. It was very emotional. But the outcome was a storyline. It was a written vision of what we wanted and how we wanted to perform. In design, I got a call one day from Ross Perot. Ross had commissioned a statue and he was going to put it in our park. And I said, thank you, but no, it doesn't meet our vision. It's not consistent with the vision. So I turned this public street, I got the city to turn the street into a promenade, designed a promenade, put the statue there outside of the park. We let our guiding vision design really tell us how to design And so in design development, we had designed a public gathering space, an amphitheater. The site had tons of challenges. We had wetlands, we had contaminated soils, and we had a floodplain problem. So we used this to take art and science and say, okay, we got our space, we did an elevated sidewalk to define the limits of the floodplain, we got rid of the bad soils, we constructed wetlands, man-made wetlands. So we helped heal the environment, which was part of our vision, healing people and healing a very damaged site. And so we used design and art and engineering all together. When we worked with veterans, water kept coming up as a healing image. So we incorporated water into every space in the park. There's 12 water features. And the character of water changes in every space. Sometimes it's flat and calm, sometimes it's vertical and very dramatic, sometimes it's bubbling and fun, but it's got a different character. Then I said, can this park help heal a problem between the city and the arts community? And it was a big problem. So I designed an art program into the design of the park, and we curated sculptures from artists around North Carolina who were veterans. And I wrote it so that all the sculptures had to be made from salvaged military equipment materials. And they had to be used to help define the space. So public art became an integral part of the design. The veterans always talked about their hands and the importance of hands and the damage and the injuries and the people they touched during service. So we casted hands from all 100 counties in North Carolina, and we displayed them on those columns that were sort of like soldiers in formal arraignment. Charlottesville. The city tried to design a replacement for the old Belmont Bridge, if you know it, right next to the pavilion. The process failed completely. They terminated the process. The community was upset. It was a linear design process. It just didn't work. So years later, they came back and asked us to do it. And they asked us to do it because, one, we made public engagement a critical part of the process. $500,000 worth of public engagement in our proposal. And two, the proposal, the project was led by landscape architects, designers, and not structural engineers, which everyone else was doing. During the process, I found this photo, and the city had told us that they wanted a unique bridge design. When we saw this photo of the original bridge, the Belmont Bridge, we said, look, it's really part of the urban fabric. It doesn't stand out. It doesn't scream, I'm a bridge. It's part of pedestrians and cars and bicycles. And so the community got behind this and said, that's our performance standard. That's what we're going to do. And so the end result was interesting. In the first public meeting we did, I did over 100 public meetings. This old lady came up to me, got in my face, and just chewed me out. And she said, I don't trust you, I don't trust the process. I said, well, we'll give us a chance. At the last community meeting when they adopted it, she came up to me and said, I didn't get everything I wanted, but this is the best process I've ever been through. And I said, that's all I want. Okay, I'm going to get in trouble here. Monument Avenue. I'm afraid if we continue a linear design process or thought process, we look at every space as an independent project, as an independent object, and we debate over content and authorship, and we debate over temporary solutions, which we're debating now. But what if we did this? What if we go to the end and we create a vision and we come around a vision? Let's just create the most significant, most beautiful street in the world. Let's create an international linear sculpture garden that people will come from all over the world to visit, and it's curated with art from artists from every culture around the planet. And if we can come around that as a vision, then we back up and figure out a path to get there.
Yes.
All right, and next up is Allan Rosenbaum, who is a studio artist and former professor at VCU. Allan's practice is materially based and utilizes a range of analog processes to investigate intersections between craft, art, and design. He has received individual artist fellowships from the Virginia Commission for the Arts in both craft and sculpture, 3 project grants from the Wisconsin Arts Board, and he is a fellow of the Virginia Center for Creative Art. His work has been exhibited nationally and internationally and is represented in public collections, including the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian American Art Museum, the new Taipei City Ceramics Museum, and the City Museum of Varazdin, Croatia, and a long, impressive list of museums and other collections in the United States. So, Allan, welcome.
In this early work, I used the surrealist strategy of combining familiar forms and images in unfamiliar ways. My goal is to shed light on the metaphorical possibilities of the figures and objects found in our everyday world. I use fragments of forms and unexpected juxtapositions to trigger multiple interpretations. These are ceramic sculptures, and materiality is the primary focus of the work. In fact, materiality is a core value that intersects with all of my work. I found the strategy to be quite adaptable. I can apply it to functional forms. This is actually a teapot. It's a historical ceramics form. I call it altered landscape teapot. It engages with the design language of the teapot. It has a spout, a lid, and a body. And it could potentially function, but it's a sculpture too. The strategy also works with public sculpture, which has design considerations that are greatly different from my normal studio practice. This piece is a City of Richmond Public Art Commission for the Richmond Ambulance Authority and is titled Cradle. The work is a symbolic signpost and speaks metaphorically about the relationship between the authority and the city. These pieces are from a series of small-scale glass objects using a vocabulary of forms quite similar to my work in ceramics. But the material is a radical departure. In the presence of light, the sculptures seem to have an internal glow. This helped me to think differently about my practice and opened the door for me to push my work in new creative directions. But how would I go through this open door? That's a long way, second. I started by going back to the drawing board, quite literally, with a series of drawings. Making sculpture for me is a slow and laborious process. But drawing allows me to quickly work through ideas. I'm able to take creative risks that are difficult to entertain when you're investing massive amounts of labor. Here are two drawings from a pivotal moment on a long journey from representation to abstraction. And when I look at these, I think so much is possible in the absence of gravity. I began to wonder if I could take some of these drawing ideas and liberate line and shape from the limitations of a two-dimensional picture plane. I set out to simplify my palette and began to construct a new body of work. When I mounted the sculptures, I found they cast these incredible shadows. And I began to think about the shadows as wall drawings into themselves. Being open to unexpected events in the studio has led to some of my most significant transitions as an artist. After decades of making ceramic objects that will be around for millennia, the pursuit of an ephemeral shadow was a completely different and liberating experience. This is a piece called Cloud Flower, and these pieces all change in nature depending upon the situation that they're displayed in. So one gallery might have a very long shadow, there might be a very short shadow, completely different. Still thinking about shadows, I tried to build on this work with a project I refer to as constructed drawings. I'm a builder at heart, and I do make drawings, but they're really almost a side project for me. The project is an effort to bring together various studio investigations into a single cohesive structure. I'm exploring possibilities with form, line, and the boundaries of a picture plane. I see this body of work as a synthesis of drawing and sculpture, and this is an idea that I've continued to explore to this day. I'm going to conclude with a group of work that I think of as material-based inquiry in search of intersections between craft, art, and design. At this point, I'm working abstractly and seeking a type of alchemy that occurs when labor, materials, and processes are creatively brought together. For this body of work, I'm utilizing a collection of neckties. All right. All right, these are neckties that I inherited from my father. They were scraps from family sewing projects. I expanded on this personal palette with fabrics sourced from diverse histories and geographies. With a little luck at estate sales and the help of the internet and friends, I found some wonderful scrap, from feed sacks to vintage kimonos to Dutch wax fabrics, materials that had been cherished at one time but had fallen out of favor. I pieced together fabric fragments and built up layers to create a melting pot of material that somehow is made more beautiful through this process. This piece is a piece called Floating Points, and it's really a homage to a musician, Sam Shepard, who goes by the name of Floating Points. And I really like the fact that he bends genres in musically, and I feel like I'm doing a very similar kind of thing with my work. The final two slides I'm going to show you are some of my newest work that introduces felting into the mix of studio processes. I see this as a bringing together of both surface and support, and celebrating the pleasures of form, pattern, color, and craft, while emphasizing the handmade as a counterpoint to the chaos of the world. I'm interested in the way the hand can slow the eye to engage the mind. Through this work, my journey as a maker has been a meandering series of intersections and transitions. It's a navigation between 2 and 3 dimensions and an elusive search for presence.
So you did it. Allan was telling me ahead of time he was a little bit worried about keeping under the 20 seconds per slide, but man, Unicia, you rocked it. Yeah. Time is spare. Just a couple of things in closing. Again, if you want to ask questions of the speakers, they'll be hanging around, and you're welcome to ask questions. I want to thank all of our speakers really for coming through for us. This was amazing. PechaKucha nights at the branch will be held quarterly. With the next event happening in February. So if you would, you can sign up for notification. Kristen, do we have an email list sign-up sheet somewhere right now?
We do at the front desk.
Okay, at the front desk, there's a sign-up sheet where you can leave your email to get notifications, and about the next call for speaker submissions. You can follow the branch on social media, and you'll see some calls put out there pretty soon. So would you just put the last one out? Right now, I'm going to take a second and make a shameless plug for membership in the branch. I see a lot of new faces here tonight. We're super excited that you came out and you're here. But membership is really important to us. It helps the branch fund its mission to explore the impacts of design in everyday life and inspiring individuals and communities to create a more beautiful, productive, and equitable future. So think about becoming a member. Membership comes along with free admission. It comes along with free access to monthly tours, discounts, and early access to events at the branch, and invitations to special events throughout the course of the year. And we have a special category that we just introduced for membership for design futurists, people between the ages of 21 and 40 who want additional access to networking and design professionals, networking events, and other professional development opportunities. So give it some thought. The web address